Thank you, Bob. It's a great joy for me to introduce Lance Allen. The last thing my wife said when I left, I was looking for some notes that I wrote out or typed up, and she said, "Why do you need notes to introduce Lance Allen?" And that's probably the best introduction anybody could have. And you don't really need notes, but I wrote a few things down because there are a few quotes. And this morning, some of you were there for the morning session, which is terrific, and we heard from somebody from India, we heard from somebody from Lebanon, international, foreign people are born in other countries. We heard somebody from Florida, that kind of qualifies. But we've got another one from Rice Lake. That fits right in. And I was sitting with Steve Rose. God put us together, and we share a lot of stories. He'd done a lot of writing, books about the Green Bay Packers and so forth, still working on stuff. But he knew Lance. He should be the one introducing. And he said, it was just announced, and make sure you mention it. Lance is from Rice Lake. The only thing I knew about Rice Lake is when you plug your electric razor in, the lights go dim. But they've got a water tower, as do most of these small towns. And he just told me that they're going to put Lance's picture and some information up on that water tower. So the only problem is he has to supply the paint. Anyway, Lance is married. Been married. I found this out last night. We were at another function. I heard Lance speak, and I asked him how long he's been married. He says 25 years. She put up with me that long. They have 3, I guess you'd call them adult children now. All 3 are in college. 2 twin boys, which are freshmen in college, and then an older daughter. All 3 in different colleges, so they're moving on, which I guess makes you kind of empty nesters for the first time. Congratulations. So he's father of 3 children. He's from Rice Lake. After Rice Lake, he always had an interest in sports. Did you play anything? Did you?
Barely.
Barely.
I was on the team.
It was on the team, yeah. But anyway, as I recall, looking some stuff up, he went to UW-Barron, Wisconsin, and then went from there to Madison, and got involved with some sports stuff there. Then graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism. Then went on up to Rhinelander next, and was a great sports guy. No, he began with weather and some news, and then moved over to a great place to jump into more sports, and that's Green Bay, Wisconsin. What a great place to really begin to start in sports. So he was over there, and then eventually came down to, for those of us from Milwaukee, have always looked at TMJ as the flagship station for so many of the major sports here over the years, and they still are. And so Lance, out of his 32 years of broadcasting, I think he's been in Milwaukee for 28 years until they let him go not too long ago. And so he's now a free agent, so to speak, but the Lord is using him in ways he probably couldn't imagine, and still will continue to use him that way. He was 2-time Sportscaster of the Year. I had down by National Sportscaster and Sports Writers Association. That was in 2005 and 12. That was 2005 and 2012. And here.
What have I been doing?
Right. And here are the quotes that my wife, I had to get the notes for. He said this: "Never took for granted that people were gracious enough to invite me into their homes for 32 years, 28 in southeastern Wisconsin. It blew me away some. Some said I became family. As a kid, I worked hard and cared about the community." That's Lance Allen. "It was an honor as a kid to cover the teams that I grew up with, Packers, Badgers, Brewers, Bucks, Marquette, and truly serve the community and to be in the community for the community." That's Lance Allen. And then somebody else said, "One of the most recognizable faces in Milwaukee sports media." And that's Lance Allen, as he was an anchor and sports reporter those 28 years with TMJ. And then I asked Lance, on the phone earlier in the week. I said, Lance, where did we first meet? And I'm not sure we hit it right on the head, but he said somewhere through the FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, or through some Bible study, or through prayer, sometimes in person, sometimes on the phone, and that's Lance Allen. So I heard last night a lot of his sports stories because he was a sports-oriented program, and I know a lot about his faith base, and so it's just a joy for me to introduce Lance Allen.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you. Tom, when you first started, whoa, little hot there. Tom, when you first started, I thought this was a celebrity roast, and I didn't get the memo because Tom and I have known each other for a long, long time. Actually, one of the ways that I knew Tom, but Tom didn't know me, was I stepped on the campus in Madison in the fall of '90 when the athletic department was hemorrhaging money. And they were getting rid of sports programs. Unfortunately, baseball was one of them. So I knew of Tom, but I didn't know the man of God that Tom was. So it was an honor when I got to Milwaukee to start doing FCA events, like Tom mentioned, Bible studies, things like that, and to get to know him on a deeper level. So give him a round of applause for what he's done in this community. I like to say I'm fluent in 2 languages, so God bless you that are fluent in many languages. I'm fluent in English and sarcasm. So one thing, and I'm probably going to offend half the people in here, is I'm not like some of your pastors I'm not going to use up all the oxygen in the room and things like that. I will allow you to ask some questions and things like that. And the other thing is, I just love to have fun, and I think that, I'm a firm believer that God has given us a brain. We're not robots, so we have all different types of skills, ability levels, and things that we are gifted with in life. And I try to use that to the best of my ability. A little bit of my path and journey. I know Bob wanted me to speak a little bit about how I got here, and then obviously weave a Christian message into it. I love opportunities like this. I think enough people now that I've been in Milwaukee now, I feel like, I didn't see Moses come down from the mountain with stone tablets, and I wasn't here when the dinosaurs were on Earth, but I feel like I've been here almost that long. But I think most people know that I am a man of Christian faith. My family means a ton to me, and just certain things in my life, but it's always a great opportunity to tell other people or have people tell other people and things like that. And to me, I always will jump at these opportunities. So thank you, Bob, for this opportunity. I was always the inquisitive little kid in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. I know we've got Eric back there. We were reminiscing about, he's from the Cumberland area. I'm from the Rice Lake area. For those of you that don't know, it's the biggest city in between Superior and Eau Claire. Rice Lake, it's up in God's country, but it's not huge. For me to be here is nothing short of God-inspired divine intervention. I will tell you that flat out. I don't have parents that were in the broadcast industry. I don't have parents who speak in front of people. They didn't know how to get involved in TV, radio, things like that. So for me to have all these doors opened up, it's nothing short of divine intervention. And I'll tell anybody that will listen to that. And I know we're going to talk sports and we're going to talk about, some really cool things in life. But since I do have a favorable audience and a Christian audience, God bless godly parents. And for those of you that are in this room that have poured into your kids, into your families, things like that. My journey started, not that you're perfect and not that, I've definitely done a lot of stupid, dumb things in my life. Thank goodness my wife is actually working today, because she'd be like, okay, I've got some stories for you. I get the rebuttal segment. But when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I know Bob and I were talking about this before I started, he was like, what is your path and what is your journey? How did you become a Christian? I was fortunate enough that my mom was that spiritual leader in our house. And I remember her, for those of you that are of a certain age, you remember the picture Bible, the children's picture Bible that I think almost all of us had, if you're in a Christian family or whatever. She would read that to me, and maybe it was the little reporter in me, the little future TV person in me, that I was so inquisitive that I had to know a little bit about everything. And I just remember the story of Nicodemus. You can go back and read it in John 3. I'm not going to go on and on and on because I'm standing in between you and actual work today. You know, I know I work in the toy department, so I don't have to work that hard, but a lot of you have to actually work the rest of this afternoon, even though it's a Friday. So I'm not going to go on and on and on about it. But I just remember Nicodemus repeatedly saying, if you have a certain version of the Bible, saying, what is it to be born again? Jesus saying, you must be born again. And I said to my mom at the age of like 4 or 5 years old, what does that mean, Mom? I don't even understand what that means. And she explained it to me on the sofa in our living room in little old Rice Lake, Wisconsin. And I'm like, well, okay, if it was good enough for Nicodemus, I want to be born again. I want to make sure that I'm right with God and that I go to heaven, you know, because eternity is forever. This earth is just a blink. When Tom was explaining to me about, or explaining to all of you about me being here 28 years and 32 years, it's been a blink. I know that they say that time goes fast, but time is undefeated. It truly is. I can't even believe that I've been here, obviously, that long. So for me to have a Christian mother who poured into me and said, hey, this is the way to Christ, I'm forever grateful for that. It saved me from some trials and tribulations. It doesn't obviously make your life perfect. It's not all seashells and balloons, as Al McGuire used to say, but it does definitely help when you have those tough moments in life. I also appreciate the fact that I had a Christian mother who had a Christian book for everything. So Bob can get behind that because I know he's in that business. So I remember, so the come to Jesus light moment or whatever is, and I like to say that God gives us a brain. God does not make robots. God allows a lot of us to do a lot of different things in life that I can go places that maybe some of you can't, but I know that there are a lot of people in this audience that you go into places that I wouldn't be nearly as effective in. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your skill set or the people that you're with or the church you're with or the nationality you are or whatever it is. Sometimes people can relate to other people better than others. And my thing was, way back when I was in a freshman in English class, that's kind of when the light went on for me. I remember sitting in English freshman class, and of course we're all a bunch of knuckleheads where we think that work is a dirty 4-letter swear word. And we had a teacher that was like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And we're all, you know, like, it's like the rolling eye emoji. We're all sitting in class going, oh, you know, we're getting this speech. And she turned the question around on us, and that's what makes an effective pastor, effective teacher, effective leader, is someone who turns a question around on you and makes you think about the future. It makes you think more in a chess move than a checkers move, or more than just kiddie games or whatever. And she said, what do you want to do with the rest of your life that wouldn't seem like work, that you would be good at? And immediately, I always have this vivid memory, even though I was only 14, 15 years old at the time. The whole class stood up. It was like 20, 25 people in basic English class in freshman year. And they stood up and pointed at me and said, he knows all the stats, all the figures, all the players. In fact, when he's sitting on the bench, because he's usually not playing, he's usually doing play-by-play of our games. As he's sitting there, he would be a really good sports announcer, a good sports reporter. And immediately I was like, oh, that does sound kind of cool, you know? So I was always the kid that you can probably tell, yes, I think Christian audience, we can joke around a little bit. Tom's heard this corny dad joke before, last night, in fact. But I do have a BS degree, go figure, because I talk for a living. Most journalism, I will freely admit, most journalism majors have arts degrees, Bachelor of Arts or whatever. For whatever reason, I like math. I've never used Calc 1 or Calc 2 in my life, but I could do it and things like that. But I liked stats. So I worked and worked and worked to get to where I'm at. I was always very comfortable speaking in front of people, but obviously you hone your craft in speech classes and forensics and things like that. And then God bless, to get back around to the Bob Conklin segment and give him a little plug, I had the mom who had a Christian book for everything. And I think she was mortified because you hear the stories about, okay, what is the news? Who are these people in the news? Are there any Christians in the media? Things like that. And she gave me a book from a Christian journalist all those years ago of a gentleman who felt like he was led to go into a dark place. He was led to be the salt and the light for an industry where there aren't a lot of Christians. And I remember reading that book and being even more inspired to be like, okay, God, if this is what you have for me, you have to open the doors, because I don't have relatives in the TV and radio industry. I don't have parents who have done this before, or even people that I can lean on to say, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to get in the door? A couple of quick God moments, and then I'll start kind of wrapping it up, because I know we have a good audience, and I will allow for questions, as I mentioned. One of the ways a door opened was I'm 16, 17 years old, and the local radio station in Rice Lake had an opening for a weekend announcer. Okay, just think of this. Whatever your favorite radio station is in Milwaukee, if it's, 1029, if it's, 620, if it's 94.5, whatever the station is, could you imagine putting a 16 or 17-year-old kid on the said radio station? It would be lunacy. And I remember talking to the program director and convincing him somehow, some way, that I really wanted to do this for a living. And I think it was, sometimes I think God gives us a little bit of a test. Like, hey, if you want it, you're going to have to work for it a little bit, all right? So one of the things that happened to me was the program director, finally, I think I broke him down, and he basically said, okay, if you want to do this so bad, a lot of our radio people work 6-day weeks. So on Sunday morning, you're going to have to come in by 4:30 in the morning to warm up the transmitter, because it takes this behemoth transmitter almost a half an hour to get all warmed up. And if you don't warm it up properly, it could blow up and we'll be off the air and you'll be done. So we're on the air at 5 o'clock, and you can run the church programs, you can run the music, but in between you can read the news, weather, and sports and be a glorified DJ and do this. And for a 16, 17-year-old kid, most of them, as you well know, you can't get them up before noon. I thought this was like the best opportunity ever, and I took it seriously. And I worked a lot of Sunday mornings and would still get to church in time by 10:30, 11 o'clock, and struggle to stay awake, but I was in church. And same thing with Saturday mornings on occasion as well. And that was a test to see, what are you willing to put into it? Sometimes I think God will crack a door open or open a door a little bit, but sometimes we have to barge through it. And I'm a firm believer in that sometimes we just shouldn't expect like things to be handed and gifted to us by God, that God wants to have us be diligent servants of Him. So that was one test. And then another test to me was, Tom mentioned it very, very well. I went to Barron County, transferred into Madison, had the great radio experience, but I felt like I really wanted to do television. I felt like that was where I was really led to be on TV. Maybe it was the ego in me, the vain, hey, everybody can see me, whatever it was, but I just felt more comfortable with television. And Craig Kashan, who you probably see on the Brewer broadcast or whatever, he was in Eau Claire and had just moved to Madison. So I saw him at a Barry Alvarez press conference once I transferred to Madison. And I went up to him, kind of like the Wayne's World thing, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. So I saw him after the Barry Alvarez press conference, and I'm like, Mr. Kashan, I was a big fan of yours in Eau Claire. I would love to have an internship. And I think he was so preoccupied, he was like, yeah, kid, just contact me in the fall, contact me later, we'll get to that, whatever. But I contacted him, and once again, I feel, if there's anything you get out of this as a Christian, have the initiative to make that call of somebody that maybe God's tugging on your heartstrings, or somebody is placed in your life, or there's an opportunity that's given to you that you kind of go, okay, God, where are you leading with this? And you just feel very strongly that strong spirit of the Lord, or something that's telling you, hey, this might be a little risky, but go for it. I always encourage people to do that, because I've seen it work in my life. And somehow Craig took a chance on me. And it's an honor for me all these years later that Mike Heller, who I work with on the Badgers radio network, was the sports director, and Craig Kashan, who was the weekend guy, hired me to be an intern and got me in the door to do television when I had no one that I knew that I could readily get in that door. And I think the world of that. I also say God has a sense of humor, as I mentioned, English, sarcasm. I get done at Madison, and I think I am going to set the world on fire. I am going to be on Sports Center in a couple years. I'm going to be the best TV sportscaster anywhere. I'm going to be up there with Jim Irwin and Bob Uecker and Eddie Doucette and all those guys. And what's the first job I'm presented with is as a weathercaster in JFW. I mean, it's like one form moved over from witchcraft, right? To be in weather. You could tell Milan and Niznansky and all my buddies that I always take shots at them. It's always good to be paid to be wrong for a living and all that sort of thing. But I think that God teaches us, like, TV can be a very ego-fueled business. I can freely say that, and sometimes I've had to check myself and say, you're a normal guy with a cool job. Cool it, You are not the man. You are, trust me, my wife will give me chores at home. I'm not the man, whatever. But I think that God uses certain situations to say, hey, you are not ready for this. You need this in your life. And what I can say is they couldn't afford a meteorologist, so I was hired as the weather person up at Channel 12. John Milan wanted tapes of this for years. Thank goodness YouTube didn't exist, so I never allowed him to get his hands on any tapes. I looked like I was 13 years old. But what it taught me was once again, I'll poke fun at the weather people that do a competent, credible job, but when you're doing the weather, a lot of it is ad lib. You have a few ideas, a few things that you write down, but what people don't realize is, I can talk without a teleprompter, and I'm talking to you like I'm talking to my best friend or whatever, person, and saying what's going on in life. But I had to learn very quickly, okay, I took a couple meteorology classes that did not make me an expert at all in weather, but I had to convey what was going on with the weather without a teleprompter telling me every step of what was going on. And at a station in Rhinelander, it's laughable, but it's true that one night you would come out on the set and they would say, well, you've got 3.5 to 4 minutes. And another night, because the tape machine ate a news story or they played the wrong thing, you'd come out on the set and the news anchor would say, guess what? I need you to fill 2 extra minutes. Can you do that? To which the secret is, if you ever watch television, when the weather person is going on and on and on a day like today about how it was 75 in Milwaukee, but yet it was still 70 degrees in Rice Lake and 69 in Eau Claire, that means that they're extending and killing more time, if you know what I mean. If I sit in front of the weather map and just say, well, it was a beautiful day in Milwaukee, 75, so let's go to the other map, and then you know that they're telling you to pick up the pace and wrap it up or whatever. But it was an invaluable experience, and I felt like God led me and said, hey, in order for you to do things in the future that you're going to do, you need to learn this. And you need to learn humility, and you need to learn a lot of different skills. And to like what Tom said, to get the opportunity eventually to switch into sports and go to Green Bay and then Milwaukee. So the ad lib experience, whether I'm talking to you today or when I was on the Packers preseason sideline or certain shows that I do, like I love working with Kevin Harlan. He's one of the best, obviously. Kevin and John and I in the preseason, none of that was scripted. And I relate it all back to a lesson that sometimes you don't even see coming, that God has a lesson or a learning experience or something for you that he's like, if you be faithful to me with the little, I will be faithful to you with the lot. Okay? Which is really cool. Yeah, who would have thought weather would get you to sports, it would get you to certain things in life. And I always say, God has blessed me beyond measure. I will also share with you a quick story, and then I will open it up to any and all questions because I know, we have a captive audience, but you probably have to go. When I was in high school, my knucklehead buddies and I would all sit around a cafeteria table and say, wouldn't it be cool to have a conversation with the Packers head coach and actually know said coach on a personal level? And as a Wisconsin kid, that meant the world to me to do the Mike McCarthy show and to actually know him. I know people have various opinions on Mike. He was good to me. I still talk to him. And then Matt LaFleur, same thing, where I'm getting my gear out of my car up at training camp this year, and I literally hear this voice behind me say, hey, you doing okay? You got a job yet? You doing what are you doing? Whatever. And I'm like, who is this person? How do they know? And I turn around and it's Matt LaFleur, and we walk down to training camp practice. So I've lived the dream that my friends and I had around a cafeteria table, but I also say that God gives you dreams and aspirations and things, if you are faithful to him, beyond what you ever dreamed. I know that, I'm speaking of Brett Favre, the player. I know that there are other things out there, whatever, but the whole thing, if you saw it with Brett Favre and I, in the middle of that football field with 68,000 people when he came back for the Hall of Fame thing or whatever, that was something that you never, ever, ever even dreamed about. Like when they asked me, like, hey, you want to interview Brett Favre and You don't think about millions of people watching it on NFL Network, Packers.com, whatever, until the moment when they say from Southern Mississippi, and you can't hear. It's literally like a jet taking off because you're on the field. And if you look at the tape of that moment, I literally said a prayer, took a breath, and said, if you screw this up, you're going to be all over TMZ and everything else. So you better get this one right. But when you look at it, it's something far beyond any goal, dream, aspiration that I ever had. And I still have, okay, I will freely admit, my buddies keep me humble, but they're also knuckleheads. They'll text me every time it's on NFL Network or NFL Films and be like, hey, you're talking to Brett, and you're telling him, hey, soak it in. I'm like, yeah, I lived the moment. I was there. I know. Okay, you don't need to tell me. I didn't realize he was wired for sound with NFL Films. But those are moments that you look back on and go, how was I even put in that position as a small town, Wisconsin kid who just loves sports and liked to convey stories and messages to people and things like that. So for me to cover everything except the World Series, which we can hope that happens finally. I was only 12 years old when the last one happened, so I am hoping that a World Series happens, but I've covered everything except the World Series. I've done everything I wanted to do, and I feel like the platform has been there to show people that, yes, it can be difficult, and we can talk a lot about the current state of the media or certain things or whatever, and I did feel times where I was isolated. That's why I got involved with Tom and his Bible study, because there were a number of Sundays where I was at Lambeau Field or on the road or covering games, and I felt like I needed to be grounded with Christian men where you could pour out your soul and be vulnerable with each other and share things with each other. It is tough. Sometimes you do feel like you're on an island, but sometimes you can be a difference maker in a field, in a spot, in your place. I'm not an economist. I'm not a pastor. I'm not, we have people from numerous walks of life in this, people that work with government figures, people that work in small business. You can go into places that I quite frankly either can't or I'm not nearly as effective as what you are. So use your platform, use what you have as your mission field, because you were placed there for a reason. And even if you're transitioning out and going somewhere else and God tells you, go this is what I have for you, he can use you and you can be the vessel in that spot until you're called to do something else. And I take that as an honor, and I love that. So without further ado, anything that anybody has as far as anything that you're thinking about sports-wise, anybody that I've met Christian-wise, athletes, things like that. In closing, I can answer pretty much any and all questions. The only question that I don't answer directly, I don't know why when I do career talks, high schoolers and middle schoolers always want to know exactly how much you make. I don't know why that became like a big topic of conversation at one point. So I would always say, I can give you a parameter if you're really interested in television or radio or whatever, but I'm not going to tell you what's on my direct deposit stub or anything like that. But no, it's truly inspirational to me as well that I've been able to go into some clubhouses, some locker rooms, some areas where it sounds like you're name dropping, and I probably will be name dropping, but to get to know, I still can't believe he's gone 20 years later, but to get to know Reggie White, because I used to do one-on-one interviews with him. So when one quick story is when I was in Green Bay, Reggie would come to Channel 5 where I worked, and because Larry McCarron was usually busy with the locker room show, like 75% of the time I would do and Steve knows this, I would actually do the one-on-one interview with Reggie that we would do at the station. And I'm telling you, I got to know that man on a whole different level. We would talk about Christian things. We would like to see Jeremy on the video for 30. He still looks the same in the face, but now he's like 20 years older, and I still picture Jeremy and Jacolia as, young kids or whatever. But I would talk to Reggie about pro wrestling. I would talk to him about just a lot of different things. And to get to know Christian athletes and people on a different level, I take that as an honor and a privilege. Aaron Campman recently going into the Hall of Fame and was very vocal about what God did in his life and young life. Jordy Nelson was involved in young life as a young person and how that guided him through certain things. I could go on and on and on. I'm probably going to miss out on a couple. I'm in a Bible study with A.J. Ellis. I go to church with him, who used to be Dodgers catcher, played in the major leagues. Marcus Marcus Hanel, who's a Brewers bullpen catcher, Ryan Bedford, Olympic speed skater, to hear their stories about not everything was great, obviously, and they had to deal with some tough things in their athletic careers and post-athletic careers and things like that. But just to be with godly men and hear certain stories like that, to me, is very inspirational and very cool that God has placed me in those roles. And I'll leave you on this note. There was times where people would be like, okay, why are you doing a story on this person? And I always say I was the conduit to the story, not the roadblock to the story. So if someone said, hey, and I recently did a story not that long ago, an Olympic athlete that had numerous injuries leading up to the Olympic trials, but yet still qualified for the Olympic trials. And she eloquently said, there is no way I should even, and she unfortunately fell short of the Olympics, but she had qualified for the Olympics previously, but she goes, there's no reason I should be in this position because I've had so many injuries. I couldn't even train properly leading up to this. It's divine intervention. It's God who did this. And I always tell people, whether you like it or you don't like it, it's that person's message, and I'm not the roadblock or the censor to that. That's their story. And I took that as a privilege and an honor to tell people's story for that. Thank you. Without further ado, yeah, I see a question. Rose, you got a question? Did I know Ward Allen? So you know what's funny is I do get this question a lot. I am not related to Ward Allen. I know who he is, and I'm obviously aware of the Milwaukee history or whatever. People ask that on occasion, but pure coincidence. Same thing with, for those of you that watch Channel 12, Stephanie Sutton, a lot of people thought that Tom Sutton was her dad. She actually married someone with the last name of Sutton, so no relation there as well. So mere coincidence. Yeah. What was that? Oh, you did? Wow, that's awesome. And a similar story to that is I kid you not, the first day I walked into TMJ, I walked in thank goodness for groups like this, because when I talk to kids, I do feel like the old man, like Methuselah. Okay, everybody knows what a mailroom is, right? In this group? Yeah, okay. There used to be an old mailroom at Channel 4, all right? The first day I'm there in '96, I walk in the back door, and like I mentioned, I think before, the soundtrack of my childhood was Jim Irwin, Bob Uecker, and Eddie Doucette. I would listen to my clock radio and listen to all the local, games, and those were the three main people that were on those broadcasts. And I kid you not, '96 October, so almost exactly 28 years ago, I walk in the back door by the post office, and Jim is standing down the hallway. And I'm like, Wayne's World, I'm not worthy. I couldn't believe it. And, I knew Jim, sometimes Jim could be, because he was so busy and so tired and so running all over the place, like sometimes he could be on and sometimes you're like, oh, okay, whatever. But I just recently shared this story with his son, Jay, and his son, Jay, was like blown away and said, thanks for sharing this. Jim could not have been more kind to me. Like, he literally stuck his hand out, shook my hand, and said, Lance, they hired you for a reason. You're my peer, not my understudy. Welcome to the team. And that meant the world to me, and obviously, like, Bob Uecker, like, to know Bob, on a personal level for years, and to have Eddie Doucette come up to me. He was just at the Mac Fun golf outing or whatever. Like, these are like some of my obviously broadcasting heroes. And I mentioned Kevin Harlan, Wayne Larrivee, Larry McCarran. I'm going to leave somebody off the list, but Jim Paschke. There's so many great, Brian Anderson, Bill Schroeder, Jeff Levering, on and on and on. There's so many great broadcasters, Matt LePay, that you get to know them and you actually become friends with them. It's so cool. It's really good. It's an honor to be in that club. Yes. Good. Yep.
You mentioned about Reggie. The funny thing is, I was thinking, my question was going to be, what was one of the most amazing, legendary people you've met? And Reggie was in my heart. He gave the honor to perform for him when he came to
Yep.
for the reconciliation.
Yep.
But hey, go get it.
Yeah. No, it's still a surreal moment for me. I was at Southbrook Church the day after Christmas. You could tell it's a vivid memory for me. December 26, 2004. I can't get out of it was the early days of, once again, I love this audience because it's we're all middle-aged people here, so this is a good audience. I like this. It was the early days of cell phones. Like you talk to a kid now and they go, "What? You didn't have one of these?" You know, I had a pager. You know, what's a pager? But December 26, 2004, I'm in church service at Southbrook and my phone is going nuts. And I said to my wife, I gotta walk out. And when our news desk told me we're hearing that, I couldn't believe it. It just, to me, Reggie was. I know that everyone is human, and what's cool about this job is what's good is sometimes you see people do things beyond what they ever thought they could do and what anybody around them ever thought they could do. But sometimes you see people at their lowest, unfortunately, too, when they lose or something bad happens or whatever. And to get to know Reggie on a different level, he just seemed, though, still like a larger-than-life person. Even though he's human, even though he's flawed like the rest of us, even though he's Christian with ups and downs, to me, that one was one of the most shocking. I just could not, I still can't believe it. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, you mentioned Bob Euchre.
Yeah.
And thank you for saying that I'm middle-aged.
You are. You got a good spirit.
But anyway, with him being a senior citizen and going on, I wondered if you could make some comments about that because lately there's been some question about the abilities of people as they get older. And I just love to hear that he's still, not as active as he was, but
Yeah.
he's still going on with the Brewers.
Yeah.
And my brothers are going to be jealous because I got them.
Well, tell your brothers hi. And yes, God bless Bob. I think he can retire and do whatever he wants on his terms, and now I'm going to be the media hypocrite that I say I'm not, because I was going to say I'm not comparing myself to him, but I kind of am. With my situation, somebody just Vince Vitrano, because Vinny's a friend of mine and he had me on the radio, whatever, and he said he asked a really good question about ending at my previous employment, and I said, you know what, Vinny, a lot of people don't end things on their terms. There have been people in many walks of life that it didn't end the way they wanted it to. But I still feel blessed. Am I happy about it? No, I have the human emotions of saying, like, I feel like I've still got more to give. I'm still in this community. I am for this community. Like Tom said, people would see me at high school football games on a Friday night with a camera shooting literally running from one game to the next and be like, okay, you're doing Packer sideline stuff. Why are you still doing but that's not beneath me. It was part of what you did for the community and those kids. It meant the world. That might be the one time that a kid is ever on TV for 5 seconds or whatever it is. I always took that as an honor, and that was cool. So I don't know. And I think Bob's a little bit. Some of us in announcing are almost like frustrated athletes to a degree. And I think it's the little bit of the chip on the shoulder mentality of I'll show you, and I think partially that's what'll fuel me a little bit going forward, to be honest. But I do think that Bob, and I wish nothing but the best, and obviously a postseason run, it would be glorious. Look at how the clubhouse responds to him whenever they do stuff. He's a beloved figure. Yeah, no problem. One more? Okay, one more question, then we got to wrap it up. Yep.
How many games did the Packers win?
Oh, are you testing my weather prognostication abilities and seeing if I lie for a living too? Oh, man. Okay, so obviously a lot of it depends on the health of Jordan Love, which I think he's coming back sooner rather than later. Let's just say that. My original prediction was 11-6. Do you feel like I'm accurate, or would you go over or under that? About right? Okay. I think not that we're a gambling audience, but I think the over-under is around 11 wins. So I would say that's pretty accurate. They do look very, very good. I will say that. All right. Thank you one and all for having me, and God bless. Thank you.